Hello, Kerry.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. And how are you? You are in Britain now?
Yes, I am.
Usually you live in California.
That's correct. I just got done doing a conference in Ireland, and that was a lot of fun, and I think went very well. So they're going to release the footage, but it'll probably be out on some kind of pay forum like Vimeo. I think Miles Johnston is working on that now.
Oh, great. Sorry, I touched my tooth. I have a problem with my tooth, but we can continue with our interview. Could you please introduce yourself? You are well known from Project Camelot, but could you introduce
Sure.
your work?
Well, I'm an investigative reporter, documentary filmmaker, and I am the head of Project Camelot, which is a very fascinating project interviewing whistleblowers from above top secret in all areas of life, but mainly revealing the secret space program. That's my area of expertise, I guess you could call it. And we have at Camelot over 600 interviews on video with various witnesses and also authors, experiencers, contactees, abductees, and police officials, ex-CIA, current CIA, NSA, all kinds of individuals who are in some cases blowing the whistle, and in some cases trying to maintain their security clearances while at the same time revealing certain information on Project Camelot. So I have traveled the world with a video camera and been doing this for the past 11 and a half years. And we have also, I did a radio show for, I think it was around 5 years. So I also have those audio interviews, although many of them seem to have gotten lost over time. Some disappeared from our server in a very strange way. So this is a problem, but most of my information is all on my website, projectcamelot.tv or projectcamelotportal.com. It goes to the same place. We now have 2 URLs because we are finding that we are blocked in some countries, so you can get there either way. And also my YouTube channel, which has, I think it's around 53 million viewers, is how they say, unique viewers, and then 168,000 subscribers.
Yeah, and it's great. You are well known for the research of a secret space program.
And yes, and so my interviewees, we cover not only the secret space program, but all areas of conspiracies of every kind, which means 9/11, the Kennedy assassination, false flags that are happening now and around the planet often, as well as health issues like people that have cures for cancer and so on, and other areas of things like vaccines, and you really name it. I also get into the political sphere. So I deal with stories that come out in the mainstream news. Sometimes I interview people from that aspect of things. One of my well-known interviews is with, for example, Gary McKinnon, who was a hacker using a dial-up modem and was arrested by the United States, and his mother fought extradition. He's a very well-known case. He hacked into the Pentagon and NASA and found evidence of what are called non-terrestrial officers, or basically a secret space program. So he also exposed to some degree what is known as solar warden. So these are the kinds of things I investigate. I also can look into Bigfoot. I mean, you name it, and I probably would be willing to investigate it if it is a mystery and if I feel that the mainstream news is not giving you the real story. So that's what we're interested in doing.
Yeah, and it's also interesting how people get punished when you have the whistleblower who is British, who told you that he has the knowledge that about cure for cancer, that the powers that be has the cure for cancer, but they would almost put him in jail for that. And you had another one, Michael Shrimpton, who a barrister British, they put him in jail when he revealed that they were planning a nuclear attack.
Yes, on the Olympics. So he revealed a potential nuclear attack, which was actually validated by the NSA. He was thrown in jail by the British authorities. He is now suing them. He's out of jail, and he is suing them. And I spoke to him very recently. He also spoke at the same Irish conference that I did, Ireland Awakens, as I say, and he had a very good speech there. And he did say that he is winning his case. He is a former barrister and soon to be reinstated as a barrister, I would say. So, very interesting man who's written a book called Spy Hunter.
Yeah. Then you had another very interesting whistleblower, William Tompkins.
Well, William Tompkins passed away not long ago, but he was what was basically supported in some ways, and we believe brought forward by a portion of the Navy who wanted him to deliver a message about his interactions with Pleiadians in the building of the U.S. secret space program behind the scenes. And he had extensive dealings with Pleiadians, as well as his knowledge of the reptilian influence here on Earth and within our secret space program, the takeover, and how they were dominating NASA. And it's very likely that it was their link up with Nazi Germany, which he details in my interview with him, talking about the whole paperclip, what is known as Project Paperclip, and the paperclip scientists that came over after the war, and so on. So this is a very interesting testimony. He also talks about Antarctica and so on. So he is a very important whistleblower. He did die recently. He was quite elderly, even when he came forward. He, I believe, was in his 90s even, possibly. So this is what has happened. We, of course, don't know if he was killed or if he died of natural causes. There is reason to believe that he may have been silenced.
Yeah, and also especially that it was the day when he died was the solar eclipse.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And he was one of the most important whistleblowers, I would say, now this year.
A lot of William Tompkins' information also substantiated one of my other whistleblower testimonies, which is Captain Mark Richards of the Secret Space Program, who had been disclosing to me about the reptilian presence and influence over the last, I think it's since, I actually was looking it up recently, and it was since 2013, so it's for the past 4 years. I've been interviewing him in federal prison, where I go with his wife, and I am not allowed any recording devices, but I can take notes if they give me a pen or a pencil. Last time they gave me a child's crayon. And I have a new recent interview that I did with him. I call them total recalls because they have to be based on my memory of our conversation. I do use a recording device directly after I leave the prison, so that I can make sure to remember every detail, which in addition to my notes does help with the process. So that's available right now, and it's on projectcamelotportal.com, as I say. And also that's my 7th interview with him. So I've also got a compilation of all the interviews now on one blog post. So it's easy to find all of the interviews, and they all have notes, written transcripts. Excuse me. They all have notes, written transcripts that go along with them.
I would also mention William Tompkins told you that they have some pill which make them live longer, or could you say something about it?
Yes. Well, what happened with William Tompkins and me was very significant because in my original interview with him, which was around 3 hours long, and it was an in-person interview, he did acknowledge and reveal that the reptilians are here on planet Earth, that they are abducting humans, and that, you know, they eat them, they use them for various, as slaves and so on, and for sexual purposes, etc. So there is a whole problem regarding all of this, as well as the Illuminati, who have a large amount of reptilian DNA as it happens, and they have some of these same proclivities. So we're talking about the whole pedophilia issue. And this is something that Tompkins was talking about of his own free will on my interview. He has talked to others about this, I think, briefly, but ultimately was supposed to come back on my show to talk about that some more in some more detail. And he was shut down and told never to speak to me again. So he conveyed that information to me. He basically was silenced in that area because they did not want him to reveal the extent of the pedophilia issue on planet Earth here and all that goes with it, also involving, of course, the reptilians. So this is what has happened. But in the interim, he had revealed also on my interview that he had hoped to have access to a pill that the Navy or the secret space program has, which reverse ages you. And he said it reverse ages men, I think, to the age of something like 27, and women to the age of 21, I think, something like that. Anyway, and he was hoping to get that pill for himself and his family. This was part of his motivation for complying and coming out as a whistleblower, putting himself in a fair amount of danger at such an elderly age, but nonetheless, he was quite motivated. Obviously, if he's passed on, if indeed that's the case, then he is not going to have access to that reverse aging pill. Whether his family would ever get it or not, I don't know. But I can tell you that I have another whistleblower who is a source behind the scenes who did say that Tompkins would never get access to that pill, that he seemed very certain of that for some reason, and I'm not sure why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then another question I have, you have interviewed James Casbolt or Michael Prince and Max Pierce, two super soldiers. I believe it was in May 2013. And now Miles Johnson has done an interview a couple of days ago, and I would like to ask you about a certain aspect, the name Fourth Reich. But first, was your impression in May 2013 when you did this interview that the same as I had, is my question, Max Pierce was more of a whistleblower then, and James Casbolt more has the function that the Illuminati has sent him to told us beforehand what they are planning, because it's their religion or their ethics. They have to tell us first before they do something really bad. So it was my impression from that interview in my May 2013. Is it correct?
Well, back in those days, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Michael Prince, whose former name was James Casbolt, and he operated for many years under the name of James Casbolt, and was communicating with me and revealing information in written form. I was trying to interview him, but he never arranged the interview, even though I was here in England, and so was he many times over the years. However, he had what you call an alter, or several alters, very likely, and he came out later as Michael Prince. So when I interviewed him, that was at the Super Soldier Summit, I believe it was called, and that was a conference where he was there in person, as was Max Spears. But Max Spears at that time was younger, and he was also apparently under the influence, in essence, of Michael Prince. And in fact, Michael Prince dominated the interview, and I can say that at that time, Max Spears was very much, in essence, being under orders, or that, what Michael Prince told me at that conference was that he was in charge of all the super soldiers at the conference, that he was their sort of commanding officer, if you will. And he was there to make sure that they did what and said only what they wanted and approved of, in essence. So it was that kind of a relationship in the beginning, from my understanding. Then later, Max Spears seemed to have gone out more on his own, became a whistleblower, did start to really reveal a lot of good information, and then he was killed. So that's kind of the trajectory.
Mm. And what Miles Johnson said a couple of days ago, that Fourth Reich is gone, something that doesn't exist any longer, and it's not my impression, or what's your impression?
Well, the Fourth Reich is sort of what two authors who are quite prolific writers and very well respected, one is Jim Marrs and the other is Joseph Farrell, have been writing about the Fourth Reich and its basic installation in the United States and behind the governments of the United States, certainly of England as well, and so on. So there is no way that it is gone, because it's very active. And in fact, the testimony of Michael Shrimpton, again, the barrister that we were talking about earlier, and his book really documents what is the extension of the Third Reich into the Fourth Reich from Germany itself. And it is most revealed in this secret organization that is called the DVD. Those are the initials, and I'm not pronouncing the German words for that. But at any rate, it's a secret organization like the CIA, known as the DVD, and it is an extension of what's known as the Abwehr, which was a secret organization working alongside the Gestapo, but in a sort of more secret capacity, run by a man named Canaris, who was head of that organization and working with Hitler. However, there seems to be some areas in which the Abwehr was distinct from the Gestapo and rather significant in terms of perhaps not being quite as bloodthirsty and, handling violence for no reason and that kind of things, which the Gestapo were known as being extremely brutal, senselessly brutal, if you want to call it that. So that organization continues to today in the words of DVD basically in Germany, and Michael Shrimpton is the best person to get the information behind the scenes about that, the extensive arms of that organization that go into the Mossad, that go into the British Secret Services, the American Secret Services. Of course, the CIA has links through the OSS from many years ago, going back to Germany. The Dulles brothers, both being apparently German agents, and so on. So we have a huge network of Germanly influenced over the years, even since World War II. And that goes into our secret space program, as mentioned. And William Tompkins was revealing that aspect of it as well. So I'm not sure what Miles was referring to, or how. I wouldn't want to, because I haven't heard your interview with him, I wouldn't want to say one way or the other. Perhaps he meant something by his statement, but I'm not sure what. Yeah.
And my next question would be about Nibiru. But before I ask you, you mentioned now Jim Marrs and Fourth Reich and the whole conspiracy. And I remember when Jim Marrs passed away, David Icke had a like 30 minutes video on his channel, and there Jim Marrs says that the current secret societies was started by a pharaoh like 1,500 years BC, which is 3,500 years from now. And I was thinking, okay, it was for me Nibiru flyby right before 3,600 years ago. Did they have this conspiracy already now then, that when the Nibiru flyby is here next time, they will take over the world? Because if you look at the military, at the government, like Australia, 500 years ago, their appearance, you would say that they are European. You look European, you would look European 500 years ago. Like North America, New Zealand, Australia, it's like that there is some conspiracy, some imperialistic regime building up, like since 3,500 years ago, hold the way, spreading around, take position all over the world, and waiting until we to attack. It's my feeling, like in your country, Bob Dean spoke with Bob Dean about this act that you have, National Security Act, I believe, 1947, with these Western countries, many of them has a pact. And then came the European Union, like now I am in Czech Republic, but Sweden, where I have lived most of my life, it's like NATO also, even if they are not on a paper. So it's like it has been built up to this military police global state so many years. So we go back only 17 years Nazism, which obviously now we understand followed behind scenes all the time. This one
Yes, I mean, I think what you're really trying to say is that there are all of these secret societies and the plans that they have go back in time, and they actually go off planet. They are plans of the races behind the scenes that have been warring. I call it a war of worlds, off planet for eons, basically. So it actually goes beyond earthly limits, if you want to call it that, in terms of earthly history as we know it. And it does go back to Egypt very clearly, and that society was there then and was making plans that would extend into the future. And we are seeing some of those plans coming forward, obviously, as in part of these various wars that we're part of. And of course, the Nazis were helped by the beings from Aldebaran. This is widely documented through Maria Orsic and the women that were part of that group. And they were also, as William Tompkins says, heavily involved in building of spacecraft and helping the Nazis from their angle. And then there were apparently the reptilians who were also, because it's understood to some degree that those from Aldebaran appear to be humanoid, as we call them, whereas the reptilian race obviously is not humanoid, although the reptoids are now a human reptilian hybrid, and they are very predominant. Mark Richards talks a lot about them and the wars we're having in the Middle East with them. So all of this does have roots, of course, in Egypt, and actually Atlantis before that. It has to do with the fall of Atlantis and the number of cataclysms that happened during that time as well. So Nibiru being the planet of the Anunnaki, this is a sort of a different division of a certain race, which is known of, for simplicity's sake, as the Anunnaki throughout history, and is related through the Sumerian tablets as such, Enki, Enlil, and Anu, which is, you know, a race that comes from Nibiru and that system. There is evidence that that race itself was infiltrated by the reptilians at a certain period in their history. This goes back maybe even millions of years, so that some of the Anunnaki were actually hybrids, which are apparently part reptilian and part humanoid, and they are known as the Syrian Anunnaki from my understanding. And that also comes from the Ashiana Dean work that reveals the history of the war between the races going back off planet for eons. And those are the two Voyager books. So there is information out there that goes way back beyond what even the whistleblowers will reveal to us at this time. And there are no other whistleblowers, to my knowledge, that are fully aware or at least revealing this information other than Ashiana Dean and her contact with a race called the Guardians, that are actually it's a melting pot of various races that have gotten together to safeguard the human experiment here on planet Earth. And you wanted me to talk about Bob Dean and I had seen him a couple months ago. At that time, I think it was right near his 85th birthday, I believe it was, and he is going blind. He's pretty much very close to blind at this time. He was losing a lot of his health and vigor. He was only able to stay up with us for a short while, but he did hug and kiss me and try to convey, I think in a nonverbal way, that he may be passing on soon. In spite of that, his mind was as alert as always, and we talked of various subjects, one of which is that he was sure that sometime in the month of September that the authorities would make an announcement related to the return of Nibiru. It has not happened yet. Today is, actually, I'm not even sure the date, the 28th maybe?
28th.
Yeah, so that's what we have. However, this morning in the news, there was an interesting reveal in an article that actually came out at the end of August, but it talks about a gravitational wave coming to us at this time, it sounded like, from a merging of two neutron stars that happened, according to the article, 130 million years ago, but it is only now that the wave is reaching us. So this may be, it struck me at the time, scientists are revealing this, but there's a lot of mystery around this reveal. They even said that they put a picture of this merging or colliding of two neutron stars, and actually what happened is then they took it down and it's disappeared from the net. So for some reason they're hiding this information and they're not revealing the true nature of it, but it sounds like the beginning of what might be a cover-up to explain the effects of Nibiru on our planet. So it is possible that they're going to use this as a way to avoid revealing the presence of Nibiru. Now, I have said before in other interviews that I think it's very possible that Nibiru is most visible in the fourth dimension, and that the reason it's very hard to see, aside from the fact that it is a planetoid and does have the capability to basically become physical, in other words, enter this dimension and also cloak itself. So this is a process going on. You have to keep in mind that for all intents and purposes, Nibiru is a spaceship. It's not just a planet. And so this is the beings in Nibiru would be, at this time, most likely living inside the planet as opposed to on the surface, if there are still beings occupying it, and if indeed it is still out there. There have been some stories of planetoids coming into our system. I've been told by whistleblowers that we have many planetoids, in fact, and those planetoids are driven, in essence, like spaceships, so that they don't follow a trajectory like you would expect a natural planet to follow. And certainly we know that the moon, Phobos, these are also planetoids that are were in essence driven into place in their certain place in regard to our planet. So it's a complex story, and I'm not sure how it's going to be revealed, but Bob Dean, as I say, did get this information. We are sort of waiting and trying to pay attention to what's going on out there in the mainstream to see if indeed there will be an announcement of any kind.
Yeah, the Illuminati back in 2013, they called the 23rd of September 2017 the most important day in human history, a revelation day. So I believe they told Robert Dean it was right, but they couldn't do the revelation for us because the timing, it wasn't right. We have been working so hard against this. So I believe that we have been blocking so much of their evil planning so that they couldn't use the 23rd of September 2017. It's how I view it. So, and when did you?
Well, we haven't. I'm not sure if you're saying did you say the 3rd of December? Because we're not there yet, so we can't really say what's going to happen then, right?
I'm saying 23rd of September.
23rd of December or September?
September. Now
September. Okay, well, 23rd of September, yes, has passed.
Yeah, it's what, yeah.
Yes, but this is very common that people are getting these dates wrong. Whether it's because, consciousness is interfering with what may be happening, or whether they simply change their plans to sort of deal with extenuating circumstances that are also coming forward in the future. In other words, the future is kind of like a stream, and time also in terms of the future is also quite difficult to determine, even for remote viewers. And I imagine also for the technology like Looking Glass that looks for the future. Back in the days when we were talking to Dan Burish about that, he acknowledged that they use what they call probabilities of things happening as opposed to specific dates, etc. And therefore it's kind of a moving target. Something that is said to happen in September 2017 may not happen, for 10 years, but 10 years in, the span of all time is a very small drop in the bucket, as they say. So this is where humans are having a lot of difficulty with understanding the timelines and understanding what things are happening when. The Illuminati themselves will also have this problem. It's clearly not written in stone necessarily, any of the future. And it's very possible that there are mitigating circumstances also having to do with the off-planet war that's going on between the various races, as well as to keep, again, this human experiment that's going on here on Earth happening. In other words, not to interfere with it in a substantial way. So there's always an interplay between light and dark, and this is playing out here on Earth as well. It's just important to keep in mind, maybe keep a wider view rather than zeroing in on one date or another, and understand that, yes, the Illuminati are putting that information out. They have a vested interest in misleading humanity. That's always been the game. So there's no reason to assume that our interpretation of even, people like Jordan Maxwell, who can certainly read their language very well, as many humans can, because we read symbols, we do understand them, even if we don't realize that we do. But at the same time, they themselves may be deceived, because this game, if you want to call it that, goes up many more levels, spiritually and otherwise. And so the level of the Anunnaki, the level of the level of the Illuminati, the level of the reptilians and the grays, a lot of this coming from 4D, which is a relatively low vibration, as it's said. So all of this needs to be viewed in a wider perspective to understand that there's more going on than meets the eye.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that Nibiru is a more spaceship than a planet. I have heard that several times from several quite people who understand a lot. And what was interesting that a YouTube channel still speaking out. A couple of days or 3 days, they put a video, Nibiru Revisited, and it was about this subject that Nibiru is actually a spaceship more, and also the ancient scriptures that are about it. And now, today or already tomorrow, the channel got shut down. It doesn't exist. So it's probably might be this information that yeah. And then about the timing for the flyby, also my impression is that the Illuminati knows that many people follow Nibiru talk and understand that there is something, the weather is strange and so on. And now that I have an impression they want to lie again and say that the Nibiru will crash into the earth, which is nonsense. It's not true. It's just flyby and it's a heavy problem. It will cause problems, but it's not crash. So they want to lie to us or be in the position that they have the knowledge and we don't have. But what Robert Dean has said to you in the interview you had 2008 with him, that it's at latest, the Nibiru flyby will occur at latest 2017.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so it is interesting. I mean, this is his information. However, it's important to keep in mind, of course, that, and this goes on with all whistleblowers, that they themselves can be lied to with a purpose in mind. As I say, it could be a change in plans. It could be an outright lie. It could be that there is another scenario that has taken precedence that we're not aware of. This, in a sense, you might look at this as a war of worlds, and in a war that encompasses the whole world as well as off-planet, other planets, etc., other civilizations, there is an unpredictable quality in wartime that you can't always predict what's going to happen, and there may be some extenuating circumstances. I can tell you that lately, one of my witnesses, again, Mark Richards, has been talking about spider beings, and I had gotten that information from another whistleblower several years before that, who was also talking about an incoming race of beings. He alluded to the fact that they were most likely what we might view as spiders, and so on. So this seems to be cropping up a lot now. There's also, if people will know if they follow Halo and all of these kind of super soldier, I call them super soldier training videos, that are stories and books and all about battles, and I've read some of them, with what are in essence beetle-like creatures, spider types creatures. In other words, there seems to be a recurring theme in the creative fiction and the creative movies, and I guess you call them, games, PlayStation and all of that, that has to do with training young people to battle these beings. So it does seem, according to my whistleblowers, to be a growing problem. And again, in my recent interview with Captain Mark Richards, he talks about the evacuation of North Carolina Barrier Islands area recently by the governor there, ostensibly because of a power outage, which sounds absurd. And this is very interesting because according to Mark Richards, a portal had opened up and a certain kind of ET race, which he did not and would not reveal to me what kind of race they were, other than to say they were a sub-race of another race that we are aware of, sort of suddenly opened a portal and went onto beaches in the area, as he says, and started eating humans. Now, they were fought off by our military. This is the story, with the help of the raptors, who are a dinosaur-like being you may be familiar with from Jurassic Park, the way they look and so on. Raptors have aligned themselves with our military. This is the story from Mark Richards, and he's been talking about this for many years. He has a close relationship with some of the lead raptors, and they are also very closely aligned to the Air Force, he says, U.S. Air Force. So they helped to battle this race and close the portal. He did talk about portal technology and how in the past we have used nukes to close portals, so that some of the major incidents in history were related to closing a portal that had opened rather than what they were ostensibly seemingly about, such as the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this is a complete rewriting of history as we know it. This is only one whistleblower, and certainly we need to get corroboration out there. I've done a show already with Vietnam vets who seem to remember in Vietnam having some memory that they feel is hazy but has been coming through to them. There's at least 2 or 3 of them so far, and I actually think I got an email from one more, who are saying that there were indeed spider beings that they saw that were the size of VWs, which matches Mark's testimony. So this is a line of inquiry that we are going down. It's a very fascinating area of investigation, but you can appreciate how the war could shift. And this is according, again, to my whistleblowers, that the war of worlds is shifting here on planet Earth, and that one race that was considered our arch enemy may not today be considered as much of an enemy as another race that is a relatively new race coming to Earth that may have diabolical agendas. So yes, there are very positive beings out there protecting us. There's a whole group of them. They're very powerful in and of themselves, but it is a balance here, as I say, between the light and the dark that is constantly vying for control in a certain way of this sector. So this is what we're a part of, and that's why having the long view can be more helpful in understanding why certain factions, even factions that are part of conventional leadership, you could call it, if you want to call it that, coming back and even from the time of Egypt, the time of Atlantis and before, some of the stuff that's being put out there, even John Moore, I understand, is somebody you're talking to quite a bit. He seems convinced that Nibiru is coming. His dates seem to have changed steadily over the years, but he does seem convinced of this. He's an ex-military guy, if I recall. I think he's also got a background in intelligence. So whether he's incorrect, whether he's been given incorrect information, or whether he is correct, but his timing is off, these are the questions you have to ask.
Yeah, and we were talking about that John Moore, he has a radio show. And
yes.
Last week, I told him about Andrew Basiago, the lawyer who, also U.S. Lawyer, who has been on Mars, isn't it so? And also time traveled. And it would be interesting to know if the map that Andrew Basiago has seen on the news, like 20 years from now, after pole shift, after Nibiru flyby, if you will, is the same as John Moore is showing the map of United States. that he believes will be after the flood or after Nibiru flyby. It would be interesting to compare the two maps.
Certainly, yes, it would be. Again, these maps may or may not be correct. It's also important to understand that humans are influenced by these various races who have agendas. And so sometimes the agenda is to actually put out a story to get consciousness to follow it with a purpose in mind. And so just, I just want people to kind of keep an open mind. I think that's the best way. But there are things in the future. I have seen the future. I am a precog and have seen the future come forward and be, happen or come true, as you might want to say it. Even recently, I have had a vision of a neutron bomb. Excuse me. So obviously, I'm being sort of targeted at this exact moment to not maybe say this, but I have seen a vision of a neutron bomb off a coast. I don't know where this is. It does not kill people. It actually is, even my understanding of a neutron bomb, it doesn't necessarily kill people. There are different kinds of neutron bombs, and maybe it even wasn't even neutron. And I don't know, the science behind all of it. I just know that my vision saw a bomb off the coast. It did explode off a coast. It might have been California, but I'm not sure. Could have been somewhere else. And the people were not killed, but there was question as to whether several years later they might develop various cancers and things of this nature from the radiation from this. So I think there was some damage of the buildings. Now, my understanding of neutron bombs, from what I've heard from various sources, is that usually it's the reverse. A neutron bomb can actually kill people, but it won't destroy the structures. I think the bomb that I saw in my vision did the opposite. It didn't kill the people, but it did destroy some of the structures near the coast, at least. And I never have a vision of this sort of thing. I don't dream about bombs ever. So I can't say whether it's true or not. I'm just saying this is the kind of thing that happens, and you do get information about the future. I have seen earth changes, some major earth changes. I've seen lots of various things. They may be potential realities. They may not be timelines that we witness in this timeline that we're on at this present moment. So it's a changing scenario for sure.
It's another dream. I remember you mentioned it several years ago. I believe that like the children, that spaceships came and the people ran to the spaceships, and you tried to say, no, don't go there, don't go there.
That's true.
This I remember a lot. And yesterday I know that every time they want to open the Hoover portal with help of CERN, like it was 27th yesterday, you see the Illuminati language, how you call it, subliminal. It was like, even you will float, meaning that even you will be taken against your will to the spaceships. And then when it didn't work with opening of the portal, so okay, tomorrow it's 29th of 9. For the Illuminati, they comprise the number, so 2 plus 9 is 11. So tomorrow is actually 9/11.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So it's next day, which is dangerous, and they already make announcement that they are planning to do something nasty. But just I wanted to tell you that I often remember that of your dreams, that one, because it was very accurate situation, which is, well, like, not for us now, 2017, that people maybe will be fooled to go to these spaceships and then, or send their children, and then what will happen with the children? You know,
Sure.
you told about pedophilia, slavery, even children being eaten, or everybody, you know, it's really nasty things.
Yes. Well, this is going on in the Middle East as well. One of my interviews with Mark Richards talks about the fact that the number of people disappearing within the so-called war in the Middle East are actually being taken off planet and eaten and so on and so forth. And that there are numbers of refugees that people are not tracking and are disappearing. So this is what's going on planet Earth. It's important to become aware.
Yeah, yeah. And I cooperate something totally different, but it's a little bit with Nibiru back. I cooperate with a Polish film team, Ripsonar News, and they will translate this interview with you to Polish. And they have several questions, but at least one of their questions is about hard crimes. If you believe that these all these earthquakes and tornadoes and floodings in your country, also hurricanes, if you believe all of them are natural, or if you have some.
No, they are not natural. In fact, the weather wars is an important part of the overall what you call war of worlds going on now, and they have the technology and have had for many, many years, really, to change the weather at their whim, and they have been doing so. Of course, chemtrails are also part of that program. So it's important to know that the hurricanes, Irma and Harvey, and I forget the names of the other ones that are coming along there, were steered. Literally, there is evidence, quite substantial evidence, that they have been steered along a certain path to cause destruction in a certain way, and that they could have steered them and dissipated them out to sea, that they were actually generated for that purpose of destruction. Now, Ben Fulford is talking about the fact that he feels that perhaps this is coming from I don't know, the Khazarian mafia, what he calls that. And I can tell you that Michael Shrimpton has his theories about, he talks about the technology. He's even talking about this, I believe, on Veterans Today on the internet, that he writes a column for on a regular basis. But he's talking about the technology behind the weather wars and the steering of these hurricanes and so on. All of this also being substantiated by the Mark Richards testimony in about the barrier islands. That was, again, an evacuation that was supposedly because of a power outage caused by perhaps something what seemed to be natural but wasn't. Again, hurricanes open portals. So it's important to know that when a portal becomes open, that beings can come in from other dimensions, craft, and so on, can use that portal. It becomes an entry and an exit way. So there is a battle going on within this. I know that Ashiana Dean, who still does have seminars that she doesn't do public speaking, but I think recently I heard that she was revealing in her recent seminar that what was really going on in the Florida hurricanes and those hurricanes was something to do with opening a certain kind of wormhole that linked up with the galactic center, a black hole in the galactic center, and that this is a whole engineered process that goes far beyond what we're even contemplating here. So this is the kind of thing that, we're very aware of. Again, getting back to the fact that weather wars is a known technology. They can make earthquakes, they have tectonic weapons, and so on. So a lot of these so-called natural earth changes that people think are happening even as a result of supposedly Nibiru may be actually engineered by the weather wars scenario more so. Again, it could also be the galactic superwave that's being hinted at now, that Paul Laviolette, a scientist that I interviewed many years ago and have interviewed several times, has written books about, that there is also energetics changing the consciousness of humans here on planet Earth. That is also part of this. So there's a positive side and a negative side. And of course, the negative side is using this energy to their to exercise whatever agenda they have in mind. So yes, definitely these things are not natural.
Thank you. Then I would like to ask you about Jordan Maxwell. The last interview you had, I believe, he mentioned that the most, like the richest person or the man at the top, I believe it was year 1959 or something like that, that he lived in California on a special place in a mountain, and he talked about it like the mountain, you couldn't even see that it's a building there. It was like,
yes, it had a camouflaged entrance, and is within, in essence, what we know of in Hollywood as the Hollywood Hills. And apparently it was there at least up to the present day, I would say, based on my conversations with Jordan, both on and off the record. But yeah, I'm sure Jordan's still well aware of this. As to whether or not the man is still there, whether he's moved operations, how deep underground his complex goes, I don't know.
Yeah, but my impression was that it was a very old man, and the year was like 1959 or something like that. So that
well, that might have been, just when Jordan became aware of it, because Jordan is elderly himself and has been on the circuit speaking about these things for a very long time. But I can tell you that he was speaking of that even, relatively recently as well.
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense because, the center of the mass mind control, it's like from Hollywood, and from there it seems to be that it's like music industry, Hollywood, that it's the epicenter of the mass mind control. Don't you feel it also that like the
to some degree, yes, but there are other centers of the mind control as well. Certainly the Tavistock Institute in England comes to mind, as well as certain centers in Germany, understanding that a lot of this came out of, again, Nazi Germany, at least the modern day versions of it. So that was instrumental during that time as well. It likely also has bases and all kinds of centers off planet as well. Certainly David Icke has talked about mind control centers coming from the moon, aimed at Earth. There's a lot about that. So this will have gone on many centuries and so on. So it's absolutely, Hollywood is one of the centers for sure.
Yeah. Okay, I have so much questions about many of those that you have interviewed, but I know the time is like it's 1 hour we have been talking, so I cannot. You have other people to talk to, I guess. But one person I really would like to ask you about, and it's his fake name was Bill Booth, or his name is Bill Brubaker or something like that.
Brock Brader, yeah.
And there were several very important things that he was talking about, and it's the interview in January 2012 I'm talking about. I believe it's the first interview with him. You have got several others or some other interview with him.
Well, I have roundtable discussions that involved Bill Ryan and David Wilcock, I believe, back at those times. Yeah. Bill Brockbrader was heavily mind controlled as a result of what appears to be a very brave and rebellious act that he participated in, sort of re-aiming his guns in Iraq rather than to destroy a certain, I think it was a Kurdish village, if I understand or remember correctly. Then he was put into a prison, a military prison, for 6 months. And it is likely during those 6 months that they did mind control him extensively. It's possible that this has also gone on in his life before that time. He has had many difficulties in this area and has had legal issues. He was taken into jail not long ago, a few years ago. He was on the run. He was in contact with both David Wilcock and Pete Peterson. My understanding is that he went into an Idaho prison or jail, but he was, his records were not public. And that, again, indicates that he was there, as part of an intelligence program and so on. So I have had dealings with him on and off since the time I first interviewed him. He was misled on various counts. He also had some good information. He also had told me relatively recently through his, I think she's his wife or his girlfriend, but at any rate, information to do with knowing something about the hacking that Edward Snowden was part of, and that he was part of an organization online that was also feeding information, I guess, through to Edward Snowden. None of that, I don't think, has ever gone out in publicly, but he did tell me that. I am not in touch with him now. I can say that initially after my interviews with him, even though I brought him forward, he turned on me and started lying about me in public, which is what happens with what we call super soldiers. It's just a name that you give someone who is working for the government, who has been augmented in some form or fashion, whether it's psychic abilities or physically. In Bill's case, it was probably not physically too much, but in other ways, perhaps. And then he turned around and apologized. He did want me to interview him again at some juncture, but I refused simply because there was no reason to invite that kind of sort of reversal that goes on. This is a problem with whistleblowers that are so-called super soldiers. They are sort of on a short leash, you might say. So they come out, they give a testimony, and then they are triggered by their handlers to turn on, in this case, Camelot. I don't know whether it goes on with others as well. I have heard a few people talk about this. And so it is quite a problem, but it's also true that these people have access to the internet and can, do their own videos, which indeed he has done from what I recall. So if you're interested in him, you could certainly, look on the web and do a search under his last name, Brock Brader.
Yeah, it was, he was talking, there were two things he was talking about that there would be some major problem, and that the Illuminati, the number one they would do is ascension, and the plan number two, if not ascension, is to hide somewhere in underground bases, and a few would be above ground. It sounds to me like this ascension is more like physical thing during Nibiru flyby, that they would leave the Earth. It would be number one, because it's also what the Illuminati are signaling. We want to leave the Earth with the children, with the infants, and if we will not be allowed, if you are stopping us, then we will hide with the infants in military bases below the sea, bottom the sea level, and so it's what they are signaling. So they didn't told him about they haven't told him about Nibiru flyby, because he didn't know what's the problem. They haven't told him, but he remembered that there were, like, they have plan A and plan B. The plan A would be ascension.
Well, I don't think that they view it as ascension. First of all, they have no control over so-called ascension, but what they were saying, the scenarios that we've heard many years from many different whistleblowers, is that they basically are going to go underground if there is something cataclysmic in our future, indeed. And they also are planning to go off planet, and they have already done so as part of the secret space program. And they can send some of their scientists, etc., off planet. And in fact, Richard Allen Miller even says that he was offered what he called a get out of jail free card that would take him to Mars in the eventuality of there being something happening here on Earth that was very dangerous to live through. So we have this also from George Green and others. So this is about going off planet to places like Mars, the underground bases in Mars, the moons of Saturn and Jupiter that we are terraforming as part of the secret space program. There are also, from what I understand, planets beyond our solar system that they quite possibly are terraforming at this time as well. And it is interesting to know that scientists now are saying that there are something like billions of Earth-like planets, is how they're putting it, in our solar system, or in our galaxy, not our solar system, but our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. So with that in mind, with all those Earth-like planets out there, you can appreciate that the secret space program will be very motivated to go and try to utilize those places as jumping off places and as safe havens in the eventuality that this so-called experiment on Earth sort of winds down or runs out of time or whatever, based on various scenarios.
Yeah, and Laura Eisenhower, they have also asked her if she would go, was it to Mars?
Yes.
So was another one. And then he told you, this Bill Wood, that there are two main chess players who are playing like chess against each other. Do you remember? And what's your take on it? What was he talking about?
Well, I think that this is an analogy, what we call an analogy. So I can appreciate that. Certainly it's not just two players. There's a lot more players than two.
Yeah. And we talked about George Green, or mentioned George Green. George told you, and there were several other whistleblowers who told us that they want to kill billions of people. Rima Labo and many others. George Green, especially.
Yes, he was asked to build what is in essence, I guess, a FEMA or concentration camp. Yeah. And was aware of, yes. I mean, the Georgia Guidestones, this is famous information, are there for you to read and look at what they planned and so on. I mean, these are plans that they do have. And in fact, they are moving forward with some of these plans. Certainly Fukushima and the radiation coming out of various reactors that are also very actively leaking radiation, I'm told, in the Eastern Bloc countries. I think even in possibly areas like Yugoslavia, Croatia, and of course in the United States, we have various reactors that are leaking and are dangerous, and the public is to some degree aware of it. There's also the threats to, things like the New Madrid fault, the nuclear power plants along the New Madrid, should the New Madrid go, erupt at some point. Should that be part of a super volcanic eruption on the part of Yellowstone volcano and or some other engineered disaster? This is all within the realm of possibility, certainly.
Yeah, and what do you make them? They could have used already all these nukes and hydrogen bombs, the Illuminati. Why do you think that they haven't done it yet?
Well, like I said, right now people are I think their sort of design is to get rid of the old people first. So they are dying in large numbers of cancers at this time. There are, of course, these earth changes that have been coming through the recent hurricanes, destroying houses, etc., moving populations. Populations movement around the earth is always due to so-called wars, due to so-called catastrophes and environmental catastrophes. This is all part of the scenario. But a major, what you might call a major worldwide cataclysm hasn't really happened yet. Whether it does, whether they are blocked from being allowed to have this happen, is still unclear to me anyway.
There are many other questions. You had great interviews, like Mr. De Souza, but I'm so thankful that you talked to me. And could you tell something about your planning? Do you have some other conference? You are going to Paris or France now?
Well, I'm doing an interview in France, possibly an interview where really it's more of an investigation, I think you might call it. If it ends up to be an interview, then of course that would be public, but I'm not at liberty to say at this time. I'm also going to take a break. I'm going to Marrakesh for a short time, and I think it's important to get away from the kind of work I do, which I don't do very often, but this is the sort of thing I do. And so I am also going to be there in case there are any whistleblowers in that area of the world, Morocco. And I'm very interested in that area. So just taking a look. And then I will be back in California quite soon, it's not very long, on October 10th. And so that's kind of my schedule at the moment. I am obviously very involved in future investigations. I have some potential interviews lined up, and we're going to see if those transpire. I tend to not talk about things until after they happen.
Okay, so I will not ask you about whom you are going to interview next, even though I'm very interested. But okay. Thank you so much, Kerry. And I wish you great journey to Paris and Marrakesh and then back home to California.
Thank you.
And thank you also and your partner, Neil, because you have made, can you see it?
Yes.
Our banner when you were in Prague, like more than 1 year ago. And
that's right.
And also you have done with your artistic partner, Neil, two great,
that's right.
great interviews which are also very...
Thank you. Yes, with Ole Damagard and with George Green in person in Prague. Those interviews are available on Project Camelot's YouTube channel. And the banners that you see, and also I get help with the editing and shooting of it. This is all with the help of Neil Anthony Sanford, who his bio is on my website under our team on the About Us page. So yes, he's been helping Camelot for over 4 years now.
Yeah, and your lecture from Prague is on my YouTube channel, and it's appreciated a lot. So thank you very much, Kerry.
All right, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Take care.